Yo, what's cracking, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Prison Break Raw. I'm your host, the one and only Big JD. Go ahead and give this channel a subscribe, share it, leave some messages or comments, hit the like button, hit the notification bell to be informed on all upcoming episodes. The SNY explosion center stage in the California prison system. Where did it start? How did it start? What were the contributing factors? And where is it going to go from here? We're going to get into all of that. I was fortunate enough to spend over 2 hours on the phone talking to a man who worked in the California Department of Corrections for over 30 years. This information you're going to receive nowhere else. Stick around. So the SNY yard is a unique system that is in place nowhere else in the country. It's exclusively in California. It has intrigued people all over the world. You've seen it on Nat Geo, you've seen it on Lockup, you've seen it on various other YouTube channels, people that have actually been on the SNY yard and shared their experiences with you. You've also heard the other side of it from people that are on the active GP yards and what their take is on all. But how did it take place? What was the goal? And why was it laid into the foundation of the prison system in the first place? In order to understand that, we have to go back in time several decades to 1976, when Governor Jerry Brown was signing into place the determinate sentencing law. Previously, California was an indeterminate sentencing state like everywhere else in the country. You had to go in front of the Board of Prison Terms in order to prove to them that you were redeemed, rehabilitated, and capable of rejoining society without committing any further crimes. This system right here was something that was an experiment. It was unprecedented in the criminal justice world. Senators in the state of California, or the legislators actually, felt that crimes needed to fit the time, and the determinate sentencing law was put into effect. It took effect in 1977. Basically, every crime across the board would now be under this determinate sentencing law, except for murder, attempted murder, and kidnapping. Everything else was to be determined according to either 16 months, 2 years, 3 years, 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, 6 years, 8 years, 10 years, so on and so forth. Also, what they put into place was day-for-day credit. Halftime is what we like to call it. This was an effort in order to alleviate the overcrowding prison system in the 70s, which was give or take about 28,000 people across 12 active penitentiaries in the California system. Going into the 80s, there were several lawmakers that started to second guess the determinate sentencing law. They were wondering why the prison system was still increasing. They thought that the law wasn't working, but it had nothing to do with the determinate sentencing law. They failed to factor in the crack cocaine epidemic that was plaguing every inner city across this country. In California alone, crack cocaine was a lucrative enterprise that was capable of earning fast cash for one guy. And if you're a gang member and you're at the top of the food chain, you have a whole army of foot soldiers at your disposal in order to lock down your territory. Drive-by shootings and that gunplay was getting big in the 80s. People were running around with AK-47s, MAC-10s, Tech-9s, Uzis, and murders were just going out the roof with what was going on in the 80s with gangbanging. And it was all based upon crack cocaine. So society and the community at large was getting tired of all of it. They wanted solutions. They wanted answers to why this was happening. Law enforcement didn't really have a clear solution to stopping it outside of creating gang units in the police departments like OSS, which was called Opposition Safe Streets, and CRASH, Community Resources Against Street Hoodlums. And these units within the police department of Los Angeles alone were put into place in order to break up these gangs. But it did no good because crack was big money and everybody had a piece in it. There was corrupt politicians, corrupt police officers, everybody was involved in this, and it was just blowing up out of control. State legislators needed a spark in order to light the fuse. And they got it in the early 1990s with Richard Allen Davis, the diaper sniper godfather of them all, who kidnapped Polly Klaus, raped and tortured her, then killed her, and then sat in the courtroom and explained in gruesome detail play-by-play of what he did to her in the face of her parents. The community was outraged. Law enforcement was outraged. State legislators knew that they had one. It was like an orgasm for them to be able to start to establish tougher sentencing laws. And they did that with the Three Strikes Law. The Three Strikes Law was put into place as a result of Richard Allen Davis and various other weirdos just like him. And it was non-discriminatory, which means it didn't apply to sex offenders or sex offenses. It applied to anything that had an element of violence or serious nature within it. Not only that, but the Three Strikes Law was also retroactive, which meant that if you had 2 robberies from the 1940s and you got busted for stealing a pack of gum at the gas station, you were getting struck out, life imprisonment, 25 to life, and that's where you were at. And you weren't going to go in front of that parole board until after you served 80% of your time. They also doubled sentences. So if you were to get a 16-month sentence, it was doubled to 32 months and you had to do 80% if you had a single strike on your record. If you had 2 strikes, you were doing 85%. And this right here swelled the prison system out of control. It went from roughly over 50,000 people to 100,000 people almost overnight. And you would think that it would be bad timing. The California Department of Corrections was also initiating an effort to disband and break up prison gang organizations and their grasp on the general population by implementing indeterminate shoe programs. So they started filling up the shoes at Corcoran and then in Pelican Bay, and people were sitting in there for years and years and years with no hope of ever getting out of there again. They were also validating associates at the same time. With that in place, along with the Three Strikes Law, the fuse was set, but they didn't really know the full repercussions of how it was going to affect the prison population in whole. Next thing you know, they come out with the 10 to 20 life law. That was a gun enhancement that they put into place. If you used a gun in any commission of a crime, it didn't matter if you fired it or didn't. If you just showed it, you were going to get 10 years, 20 years, or life, depending on the severity of it. They also were religiously using a gang enhancement, was what, 186.22, street terrorism. All these things put into place created a cocktail of tougher sentences, long prison terms, ballooning prison populations, and I'm sure you've heard it said, more people, more problems, more chaos, and that's exactly what happened on every yard in the California Department of Corrections. County jails were blowing up, were filled to capacity. Prisons were filled to capacity. The rumors started to come out like around the later 90s, around maybe 95, 96, that they were going to start cutting it down to 65%. Any of you who've done time in the 90s, you've heard that, hey man, they're going to give us 65% now. But it never came. All it did is just continue to go. People were being affected by this law. There was a lot of older gente, a lot of older homies that were starting to step back. People were getting scared of this. Nobody wanted to be the shot caller. Nobody wanted to call the shots. Nobody wanted to get sent to the back, to the shoe, and be stuck in there for years and years and years. So what happened next was there was a whole shelf, as it were, of crash dummies to choose from in order to put in the front and run the yard. And somebody had to basically take the keys. Once all the main prison gangs were gone, it was just a whole army of foot soldiers that had no general. It was like a monster that had its head cut off, but it refused to die. So various crash dummies were starting to raise their hand to become what was called llaveros or shot callers or key holders, whatnot. And a lot of these guys had no business being in a position of power. They basically didn't have the managerial skills to run a yard. They didn't have the common sense or the brains. All they knew how to do was to make money in the dope game. So they had all the dope, they had all the money, so of course they had all the power, because money buys power, even in the prison system. The next thing that happened was you had people that were in control of everything, and they were ruling over these yards with an iron fist. Anything and everything was a violation. People were getting smashed off the yard, whacked, stabbed, zippered, The zipper was started to become a new phenomenon because it basically left the out. You don't have to kill him, homie. Just give him a zipper and send him out of here, and they'll put him in PC somewhere. Now, before it was S&Y, it was commonly referred to as PC. But PC was a small part of the prisons. It was a small fraction of the prison system at the time. You had CMC East, California Men's Colony in San Luis Obispo, and you had Mule Creek. Mule Creek was designed as kind of like a pilot program. It was a soft prison that was designed to see if you can actually put into place an S&Y type of a system. Now, in order to understand what Mule Creek is, it's a level 3 facility that's in Ione, California. It's a 270 yard. And it had various notable weirdos on its yards. I mean, you had people like the Rainbow Man, Andrew Luster, various diaper snipers, tree jumpers, seat sniffers, cannibals, necrophiliacs, cross-dressing mass murderers. It was a smorgasbord of the weirdest of the weird. And what came next was step-downs, dropouts, people that just couldn't stand to be in the shoe anymore. The shoe system was designed to break your back, to break your spirit, to break your will, to completely tear you down. Now, there's some really strong dudes that were in that shoe program, and it broke them down. They didn't want nothing to do with it anymore. They couldn't take it anymore. It's like being in a deprivation tank. So these cats were debriefing and dropping out. They were sending them to places like Mule Creek, CMC East, but it was getting to be too much of a problem. Like, where are they going to put all these bodies? So they started designating other yards for this system. And then they put in the step-down program. They put that into place. Also, gang units, IGI, were going into these shoe programs and trying to enlist people to drop out. They were basically telling people, you get an indeterminate shoe, we're going to validate you, we're going to do all that. When they were in ADSEG, all you got to do is debrief, drop out, and we'll send you to a spot where you'll be safe from any kind of retribution. And just like that, the S&Y system was born. It didn't start to really blow up or boom until after about 2001, when it really was finally and forever defined as S&Y, Sensitive Needs Yard, S&Y. Law enforcement, or the California Department of Corrections, did a lot in creating this, but they had allies in doing this. Unbeknownst to the general population yard, they were actually working with the CDC in order to fill up these bodies. It was like a self-destruct system. Now, I know a lot of people don't want to hear this, and they're probably going to disagree with me. I don't really give a fuck, because I was there and I saw this take shape. I saw all the bad calls. Zero tolerance, merciless practice of a tyrant that was looking for any reason to whack somebody, smash somebody off the yard, zipper somebody out, and send them out of there to PC or S&Y now. It could have been anything from some young kid, some first-termer, walk into the shower in his shower shoes, and they tell him one time, don't do it. And he does it again, he's getting banged off the yard. And the Safer Prisons Act and the approach to make prisons safer was not only about putting cameras in there, but it was also about giving people an out from the gang life. And if anybody was a victim of violence on any of these yards, it doesn't matter how small it was. If it was two guys beating a guy up and he's on the ground balled up, that man's going straight to S&Y. If somebody gets stabbed, going to S&Y. It even went out to the streets because there was a lot of efforts in order to stop drive-by shootings and to consolidate gangs in namely Los Angeles and Orange County by putting a green light on your neighborhood if you did a drive-by shooting. Now, if you come in the system with a drive-by shooting, you're going to the S&Y yard. If you drop a wheeler, you're going to the S&Y yard. If all the hoodas are running into the unit and you get scared and you flush a Fiero, you're going to the S&Y yard because they're going to smash you. It's just the way it is. Drug debts, too. Since everybody that was running everything was all spagacked on that meth or heroin or something like that, they didn't basically set a rule at least not where I was at, that you can't use drugs. Now, I've heard that up north, the Northerners had a general rule that you can't use any form of narcotics in the prison system, but that wasn't the case for whites or Southerners. People were getting high all the time. People were running up mass drug debts. Once you got that Dear John letter in the mail, your old lady wasn't going to pay it no more. It would come to a point in time where moms was telling you, I ain't paying your drug debts anymore. Next thing you know, dude's running off the yard, and he's going where? To the S&Y yard. There were people that their paperwork was 1 day late, 1 day over the 30 days, and he's getting smashed off the yard and sent to the S&Y yard. Mistaken identity, bad calls, all these things were filling up the S&Y yard, and the GP population, not knowing, was actually working with the CDC to do this. It's just like that, man. It's just that simple. So if anybody has anybody to blame for why the S&Y boom occurred, basically we could blame ourselves on the GP yard. Me being of Generation X, and it was my generation that was moving into positions of power on all these yards, I started to see where all this was going. And at one point in time when I wanted to be on the table in the political positions of it, I decided that I didn't want to be a part of that. So what I simply did is I just soldiered on. I was down for the business. I was at the disposal to take care of business and to clean up the yard if I had to. But I wasn't going to get involved in the upper position of politics because I seen where it was going. One bad call and you're gone. You're gonna get validated and sent to an indeterminate shoe, or you're gonna make a bad call and someone's gonna put a hit on you and you're gonna be going to S&Y. Didn't want no part of that shit. But I feel responsible in my generation because Generation X, we fucked the whole system up. We fucked it up, man. A lot of you millennials and Generation Y that are now filling up these beds and all these penitentiaries, you don't know what it's like to be in a system without the S&Y yard. But I was there before it was a thing. And I'm telling you that we did everything in our power to fuel the flames. We did everything in our power to fill up those yards. It was an effort on part of the Department of Corrections to break down all the organizations. That was the plan. It was a 25-year plan to break up all the gangs and to implement any rule and policy and practice that they wanted. Once they had successfully locked in a third of the prison population into the S&Y system, they could pretty much do anything because that's a large chunk of bodies. Now they want to reintegrate the yards, and it makes you wonder why. But you're going to hear it firsthand right here why they're doing that. A lot of people ain't gonna tell you this. You're not going to hear this nowhere else. But they feel that this is the best way to finally lock down the system to where now you've got a lot of these prison gangs are back on the yards. Once they reintegrate the yards, they have found the reason to lock them back up in the shoe forever. Because the shit's going to pop. And they're going to be the first ones to get on there and say, you see, they're animals. We got to lock them back up in the shoe. Give us more money to do this. It's a cash cow, like I said. Prisons are a cash cow. And to reintegrate the yard, it's a setup, basically, in order to achieve a goal. Everything that anybody in government, Department of Corrections, Department of Justice, what have you, does, trust and believe that it is a calculated move in order to do something. It was always about divide and conquer. By making it so hard on everybody that they would break down criminal enterprises, organized prison gangs, organized crime in general, street gangs, all of that. They also put gang injunctions into place in the streets. All these things were to create this system, a soft system, a system where everybody is broken down and completely weak. And there's no stopping it. I don't care what you do. I don't care what you say. You're not going to stop it. It's not going to stop. They're going to integrate these yards. That's part of the 25-year plan. They're going to desegregate all these cells, which means you're going to be living with everybody, anybody. Whoever they throw into there, that's who you're going to get. People say, oh no, they're only doing this on the lower yards. Trust me, it's coming. It's going to be system-wide at some point in time. Because if you have no organization, you have chaos. And when you have chaos, nobody can agree on anything. And they don't want that. The system doesn't want that. It's a warehouse of bodies. It's a cattle drive. And all of us are responsible for making it happen. Every person that's been smashed and sent to the S&Y yard, every bad call, creates another disgruntled employee to swell up the ranks of the revolution against once the GP yard, of which is going to be gone before too long. If you're in prison right now, and the man you're standing next to could be the next one to go, or it could be you. Because the philosophy of make a homie, don't break a homie went out the window when the crash dummies started taking control of the yards. Now it was all about make a homie just to break a homie. Ruling over these yards with an iron fist, merciless, no mercy, zero tolerance. Damn, man, I seen this shit in LA County. Wait till you see my LA County jail stories. I'm doing a series on that. Man, had that system changed from the first time I was in it. But this S&Y boom is a result of a coordinated effort and a alliance, unbeknownst to the inmate population on the GP yard, with the Department of Corrections in order to make this S&Y yard. We wrapped it up, put a pretty little bow on it, and delivered it to them with our actions. And the only way to stop that is to ease it up a little bit, is to pump the brakes on all this bullshit and all this high power rhetoric and talk that a lot of these cats are throwing out there. In order to keep the morale of the military itself, is you have to have a general that is respected and loved, not one that is feared and hated. All that does is it creates exactly what you're seeing, and it's not going to stop. Because I don't believe that anybody is mentally capable of changing it at this point. It's out of control. It's going that way. It's happening, so you might as well just come to peace with it. The S&Y foundation, the foundation for the S&Y yard, in a nutshell, there it is. There's what you got. Now you're going to have to live with it. Coming at you with that raw, uncensored, uncut, no holds barred, no sugarcoating, non-politically correct, all up in your face content that you love. See you on the next one.